The Gaither homecoming family has faced more loss than most fans realize. Over the years, some of its most cherished voices have left this world far too soon. Singers whose music once filled living rooms and lifted spirits in churches across the country. They weren't just performers. They were friends, mentors, and symbols of hope for millions of gospel fans. Behind every farewell concert and memorial song lies a story of faith, love, and the power of music to outlast death itself. In this video, we are going to remember the beloved Gaither homecoming heroes who tragically passed away. Number 1. Jake Hess. Jake Hess spent a lifetime with music as his work and his witness. Born in Alabama on December 24, 1927, he grew up singing in churches and family groups. By his teens, he was already on radio and touring with quartets. Through the 1940s, 50s, and beyond, Hess built a reputation for a smooth, emotional lead voice that fit both traditional quartet songs and more modern gospel arrangements. He won awards, he worked with top singers, and he helped form groups that influenced generations of gospel performers. People who followed Southern gospel often point to Hess as a bridge between the older quartet style and the more contemporary gospel sound that developed in later decades. He recorded many songs, and he also mentored younger singers who admired the clarity and warmth of his tone. Those who knew him speak about his dedication to the message behind the music. He was not only a performer, but a teacher. He spent long hours in rehearsal and in the studio helping arrangements find the best shape. In public interviews, Hess could be plain-spoken and honest about the struggles of life on the road. Behind the scenes, he carried the usual burdens of a touring musician: late nights, family strain, health issues. Yet listeners often said his voice carried comfort. Near the end of his life, after decades on stage, Hess still sang when he could. He died on January 4, 2004. His passing prompted many memorials from artists who described him as a model of steady faith and musical integrity. Fans filled churches and halls to remember a man whose career touched both the traditional gospel world and the artists who reshaped Christian music in the second half of the 20th century. The practical part of his legacy is in the recordings and in the singers who learned from him. The human part is in those who say his singing gave them hope on hard days. Number 2. George Yountz. George Yountz's voice was one of the deepest and most recognizable in Southern gospel. Born in North Carolina in 1930, he became a professional singer in his teens and served in the U.S. Army before returning to music. Yountz co-founded the Cathedral Quartet and spent decades as that group's bass singer, giving the band a distinctive sound that drew large audiences across the United States. He was known for a personality that combined humor, straightforward talk, and a clear testimony of faith. Audiences warmed quickly to his stage presence. He could tell a story, laugh, and then lead a serious, moving gospel number. Over his career, he recorded many albums, toured extensively, and was honored by peers in gospel music circles. Health troubles interrupted his schedule in later years, and he faced medical treatments that limited some performances. Still, he continued to sing when he was able, and to appear at gatherings that celebrated gospel music. When he died on April 11, 2005, colleagues and listeners remembered him not only for his low, resonant bass, but for his kindness, quick wit, and the way he encouraged other artists. His family, bandmates, and fans recalled long nights on buses and the loyalty that formed among quartet members who lived and worked together for years. The obituary notices and tributes that followed his death stress both his musical achievements and his steady character. For many in the gospel community, George Yountz remains a name linked to a style of quartet singing that influenced singers who followed. Number 3. Vestal Goodman. Vestal Goodman was often called the Queen of Southern Gospel by fans and peers, and she earned that reputation through a long career marked by powerful singing and a lively stage presence. Born in Mississippi in 1929, she came from a musical family and performed with the Goodman Family Group for many years. Her voice had a bright, forceful quality that suited both upbeat numbers and tender ballads. She sang with obvious emotion, and many listeners described her performances as raw and honest. In addition to her singing, Vestal was known for a warm personality and for an ability to connect with crowds. She often moved people simply by being present and sincere. Over time, she appeared at festivals, revivals, and many live recording events, including appearances tied to Gaither homecoming projects that brought classic gospel figures to a large television and video audience. She kept working late into life and continued to travel for music. On December 27, 2003, while visiting family, she died, and the gospel community marked her passing with services that reflected both her public career and private relationships. Those who knew her remember a woman who lifted others, who taught younger singers, and who kept her faith central to the life she shared on stage. Her recorded songs remain in many collections, and her influence shows in artists who learned to sing with emotional clarity and directness. Number 4. Dottie Rambo. Dottie Rambo wrote songs that found a place in many churches and on many gospel albums. Born in Georgia in 1934, she began performing as a child and later became widely known as a songwriter as much as a singer. Rambo wrote hundreds of songs, many of which were picked up by a wide range of artists in the Christian and country music worlds. Songs like "He Looked Beyond My Fault" and others became standards that regular listeners heard at church services, concerts, and on radio. Her writing style was simple and direct, with lyrics that focused on personal need, grace, and redemption. As a performer, she moved audiences with a voice that could be tender and also commanding. Over the course of her life, she toured extensively and recorded many albums. Her work brought her recognition from both religious and secular artists who covered her songs. Tragically, Dottie died in a bus accident on May 11, 2008, after finishing a performance. News of the crash spread quickly through the music world, and tributes came from a wide circle of artists who had sung her material or worked alongside her. Her memorials included performances of the songs she had written, and public figures noted the reach of her music. For many listeners, Dottie Rambo's legacy lives on in the songs people still sing in churches and at memorials. Music that was written to speak plainly about need and mercy. Number 5. Rex Nilon. Rex Nilon was a bass singer who spent decades in Southern gospel and who played a role in shaping one of the better-known family groups in the genre. Born in Georgia in 1932, Nilon sang with established groups and later led the group that became known as the Nelons. He had a stage presence that matched his vocal depth, and his career included long tours, many recordings, and steady work in churches and concert halls. Nelon's name appears in accounts of gospel music history as someone who kept a family band active and competitive during times when the music industry was changing. He worked with younger singers and passed on a clear sense of how quartet and family group singing should be arranged and presented. In January 2000, Rex Nilon suffered a heart attack and died. Reports note that his death occurred just before a scheduled Gaither homecoming taping in London. His passing was felt strongly by fans who had followed his group and by colleagues who remembered him for his leadership and perseverance. Tributes spoke to his role in continuing an older style of Southern gospel while adapting to the practical demands of modern touring and recording. For friends and family, his early death left a gap that others in the group tried to fill while keeping alive the music he loved. Number 6. Ben Spear, grew up inside gospel music. He was the youngest child in the Spear family, a group that began singing in churches and on the radio in the 1920s, and became one of Southern gospel's steady pillars. Ben's childhood was filled with rehearsals, tours, family devotionals, and songs learned by ear. That early rhythm shaped everything that came after. He learned to arrange harmonies, to listen for what a song needed, and to work with other singers so the music could hold people's attention and carry a message. Those were practical skills he used for decades. When he reached adulthood, he wore many hats. He sang, taught, arranged, ran a music publishing business, helped run a record label, and later became the music director for the Gaither homecoming concerts and videos. That role put him behind the scenes in one of the movement's largest revival-style gatherings. In that position, Ben helped plan music sets, organize rehearsals, and guide older singers and younger artists through the demands of live tapings. He had a steady way of working with people, practical, patient, and focused on the song's heart. Many who worked with him describe him as someone who made complex jobs look like routine steps. That steadiness let producers rely on him to bring order to big, sometimes chaotic tapings. Ben's influence spread beyond any single stage. He taught sessions at music schools and conventions. He wrote and arranged songs that other groups adopted. He trained singers to read charts, to breathe together, and to place consonants where the lyric would carry most clearly. Those technical lessons mattered to singers who wanted to move from hobby to profession. For younger performers, he was a bridge into a world where music was both craft and ministry. He insisted on discipline, on starting rehearsals on time, on protecting the singer's instrument, on raising a voice for the lyric's meaning rather than for personal showmanship. That was his practical ethic. On the human side, Ben was remembered as gentle and patient, a man who could calm a nervous performer and who preferred the work of helping others to taking the spotlight. He rarely sought headlines. Instead, he showed up early to sound checks, stayed late to tidy the set list, and answered emails from singers asking for chord changes or advice. Those small tasks are invisible to audiences, but they are central to keeping touring music projects healthy. Friends who spoke at memorials said he treated people with respect, even when tensions ran high. For many, that consistency mattered as much as the music itself. In his final years, Ben faced Alzheimer's disease. His decline was slow but visible, and it changed how friends and audiences interacted with him. Instead of a steady conductor of rehearsals, he became a man who listened to old songs and found comfort in familiar harmonies. The gospel community wrapped care around him with visits, songs, and public thanks for what he had given the music world. When he died in 2017, tributes focused on the practical gifts he left behind. Recordings, arrangements, a generation of singers who could do the job well because someone had taught them how. People who loved him remember how he smiled when a rehearsal ran clean, and how he treated the work as something worth preserving. That mix of craft and care is why many still name him when they talk about the practical backbone of Southern gospel music. Number 7. Gary McSpadden. Gary McSpadden's voice and his career moved across several well-known groups, and his life shows how one singer can shape a wide corner of gospel music. He began in quartet and Southern gospel traditions and later sang in groups that reached different audiences. The Statesmen, the Oak Ridge Boys, when they were still transitioning, the Imperials, the Bill Gaither Trio, and at times the Gaither Vocal Band and homecoming gatherings. That path meant he saw the business from different angles: the old quartet circuit, mainstream country crossover, television production, and the newer concert and video era that the Gaithers helped popularize. People who worked with Gary emphasized two practical strengths. One was his voice, warm, clear, and able to carry a melody so that a lyric felt immediate. The other was his instinct for production. He produced albums and television specials, including projects in Branson, Missouri, that helped shape how gospel music moved into tourist and family entertainment markets. He helped artists record songs and then present them in formats that paid attention to visual staging, audience pacing, and the small edits that make recorded performances land. For artists who wanted to move from church and stage to recorded media, Gary's experience offered a model for how to do it with care. Gary also wrote songs that other singers recorded and used in church services. His tunes were direct. They often used language that pastors and worship leaders could place into a set list without reworking the words. On stage, he could move a crowd from laughter to quiet reflection. That versatility made him a regular on Gaither projects, where a mix of youthful and older performers required an experienced presence who could hold a number safely. He served both as performer and as a practical coach to groups that needed steady leadership. In private life, Gary and his wife Carol served a congregation they led in Branson, and friends described them as people who tried to keep ministry central to whatever they did. That mix of local church work and national touring is common among gospel professionals, but Gary carried it with a public calm that people respected. When he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2020, his family made his situation public. He spent his last days in hospital care, and he passed surrounded by family. The outpouring of messages after his death stressed both his voice and his generosity. Colleagues credited him for opening doors, mentoring younger artists, and producing projects that sustained many careers. For listeners, his songs remain a part of hymnals and concert programs, and his production work lives on in recordings and videos that people return to for both music and memory. Number 8. J.D. Sumner, John Daniel. J.D. Sumner is a name often mentioned when people talk about bass singing and about the commercial changes that moved Southern gospel toward larger audiences. He sang a very low bass, and for a long time held a Guinness record for the lowest bass note recorded. That voice gave him an unmistakable role in quartets and on recordings. Audiences learned to expect the depth he added to harmonies. But Sumner's impact wasn't only vocal. He built a business around gospel music, promoting tours, managing artists, and helping to push some forms of gospel into more mainstream venues. Sumner sang with several important groups, and he helped organize the Stamps Quartet into a touring outfit that reached wide audiences. He also worked behind the scenes as a manager and promoter. Those activities meant he had both an artistic ear and a practical sense of how to keep a touring group financially and logistically viable. He knew how to book dates, arrange travel, and shape a program so that audiences got a reliable, quality show. Artists who toured with Sumner remember that kind of experience as a kind of apprenticeship in how to make gospel work as a living. On top of the music business work, Sumner was a public figure with a personality that fit the stage. Direct, sometimes larger than life, and always ready with a story. He wrote an autobiography, and he used media to explain the music he loved. People who met him found him practical. He liked details, he kept schedules, and he expected professionalism from those who worked with him. That mixture of performance skill and business sense helped create steady touring careers for many singers in the era he led. Sumner died while on tour in 1998, which many who worked with him remember as both tragic and fitting. He lived by the road, and he kept working until the end. In the years after his death, people noted how he had helped move Southern gospel into different markets, while also insisting on a traditional sound that audiences associated with sincerity and faith. Musically and practically, he left recordings and a model of how to run a quartet as both ministry and profession. Those who admired him pointed to his voice, his promotional skill, and the people he employed and mentored as evidence of a long, busy life spent entirely inside gospel music. Number 9. James Blackwood. James Blackwood's career stretched back to the golden age of quartets. He sang with the famous Blackwood brothers and became known for a clear, resonant lead and for a steady devotion to the hymn tradition. The Blackwood brothers were one of the quartets that helped define Southern gospel's public sound in the mid-20th century. They toured widely, made many recordings, and were a reference point for other groups. James's voice and stage manner were part of that foundation. Beyond singing, James was one of those people who helped keep the business functioning. He worked on recording schedules. He toured during the circuits of churches and auditoriums that defined the market, and he mentored younger singers. As the recording industry changed, he adapted while keeping the core elements of quartet singing. He appeared in Gaither homecoming projects that deliberately brought older quartet singers together with newer artists. Those homecoming appearances highlighted a through line in gospel. The older singers carried repertory and vocal techniques that younger groups drew on when they needed authenticity. For many fans, seeing James on a homecoming stage was a way to connect to the music's history in a single moment. James died in 2002. Tributes focused on his long service to gospel and the continuity he represented. Colleagues remembered someone who worked steadily, who preserved songs in careful arrangements, and who treated audiences with respect. For many listeners, his recordings still serve as reference points for how quartet music was supposed to sound. Balanced, devotional, and focused on the lyric, rather than on shock value. That legacy is practical as well as emotional. It gives teachers and singers a recorded set of examples to imitate and learn from. Number 10. Hovey Lister. Hovey Lister was best known as the pianist and leader of the Statesman Quartet, a group that combined showmanship with close harmony. His piano work provided a driving rhythm, and his leadership helped shape a style that became popular on the Southern gospel circuit. The Statesmen were a tight, professional touring group, and Lister's keyboard and arranging work helped them stand out in a crowded market. Lister's role was practical and visible. He set tempos, arranged introductions, and pushed singers toward clean entrances, so a tune sounded crisp in a church or an auditorium. He also worked as a songwriter and arranger, creating intros and interludes that gave each performance a signature. That kind of hands-on musical work matters, because it teaches younger musicians how to support a singer and how to shape an entire show around a small number of strong numbers. Those skills kept the Statesman on the road and on recording lists for decades. People who knew him say he was tough but fair, a leader who expected rehearsals to mean something and who expected musicians to show respect for the audience's time. He kept a practical focus on the business side as well: booking, payroll, and travel logistics. That combination of musician and manager is common in quartet history, but Lister's particular skill at piano and at stagecraft made his group reliable and popular. He kept working into the late 20th century and died in late 2001. After his death, colleagues remembered a man who had shaped styles and taught many younger players how to work in a professional touring band. Their voices may be gone, but the songs they left behind still speak to hearts everywhere. Thank you for watching, and may their music continue to remind us of the faith and hope they carried.